2,000 years ago, somewhere in the ancient Mediterranean, a craftsman built a machine unlike anything we thought the ancient world could produce. It was made from bronze. It contained dozens of precisely cut gears. It could model the movements of the sun and moon, calculate astronomical cycles, predict eclipses, and track calendars connected to the rhythms of the heavens. And then, sometime in antiquity, the machine disappeared beneath the sea. For almost 2,000 years, it lay inside a shipwreck. When divers finally recovered it, nobody understood what they were looking at. At first, it looked like nothing more than a corroded lump of metal. But hidden inside that lump was something extraordinary, a machine that seemed to calculate the sky. And the deeper scientists looked, the stranger the story became, because this was not supposed to exist. If you're fascinated by the hidden stories behind history, subscribe to Chronicle Nexus and join us as we uncover the mysteries that shaped our world. The story begins not in a laboratory, but beneath the Mediterranean. Near a small Greek island called Antikythera, where the waters between the Peloponnese and Crete can become dangerous even today, an ancient ship came to rest on the seabed. We do not know exactly why it sank. We do know that it carried an extraordinary cargo. Statues, bronze sculptures, glassware, pottery, coins, luxury objects. And among the wreckage was one of the most important technological discoveries ever recovered from antiquity. The shipwreck was discovered by sponge divers around the turn of the 20th century, and the recovery operation began in 1900 and continued into 1901. The divers were working in dangerous conditions, using the equipment of their time, and the expedition cost lives. The wreck eventually became one of the foundational discoveries in the history of underwater archaeology. But nobody initially knew that the wreck contained a technological mystery. Among the corroded objects recovered from the seabed was a strange bronze object. It was badly damaged, encrusted, fragmented, and almost impossible to interpret. Then, sometime after its recovery, something caught the attention of archaeologists. Inside the corrosion were gears, not one, not two, a system of interlocking gears. The discovery changed the question completely. This was no ordinary bronze artifact. Someone, more than 2,000 years ago, had deliberately engineered a compact mechanical system capable of transforming the turning of one input into a series of astronomical calculations. The object would eventually become known as the Antikythera mechanism. Today, it is divided into 82 surviving fragments, containing around 30 identifiable toothed gears, along with dials, scales, axles, and inscriptions. Researchers estimate that the original device was housed in a wooden case roughly the size of a large book. But that description almost makes the machine sound simple. It was anything but simple. Imagine holding a bronze box in your hands. You turn a small handle. Inside, a chain of gears begins moving. One wheel turns slowly. Another turns at a different rate. A third completes a cycle over months. Another over years. And somewhere on the front, indicators represent the movements of celestial bodies. The machine was effectively taking mathematics and turning it into motion. That idea is important. Because the ancient Greeks did not lack sophisticated mathematics, they had geometry. They had astronomical observations. They had theories about planetary motion. They had inherited and adapted astronomical knowledge from earlier civilizations, including Babylon. But turning mathematical relationships into a physical machine was something else entirely. The Antikythera mechanism appears to have done exactly that. And this is where the mystery becomes much larger than one artifact. Because if one machine survived, what happened to the technology that produced it? For decades, researchers could only guess. The corrosion concealed the internal structure. Many components were missing. The inscriptions were difficult to read, and the surviving gears had been distorted by nearly 2,000 years underwater. Early investigators could see that the object was mechanical, but they could not explain how it worked. Then, technology gave archaeologists something the ancient craftsmen never imagined: X-rays. In 2005, researchers subjected the fragments to high-resolution X-ray computed tomography. For the first time, scientists could see inside the corroded bronze without physically taking the machine apart, and what appeared inside was astonishing. Hidden behind layers of corrosion were inscriptions, numbers, astronomical terminology, instructions, descriptions of celestial cycles. The machine was beginning to speak. The 2006 research published in Nature demonstrated that the mechanism could predict lunar and solar eclipses. It also revealed evidence for a sophisticated treatment of the moon's irregular motion. That discovery transformed the artifact. It wasn't simply an ancient clock. It wasn't merely a calendar. It was an astronomical calculating device, a mechanical model of the heavens, and perhaps the earliest known surviving analog computer. But then came an even more difficult question. What exactly did the original machine display? The back of the mechanism became easier to understand. One dial represented the metonic cycle, a relationship between lunar months and solar years. Another incorporated the Saros cycle, which was useful for predicting the recurrence of eclipses. There was also a calendar connected to the timing of major Greek athletic festivals. The gears were translating astronomical mathematics into physical movement. But the front of the machine was far more mysterious. Much of it had been destroyed, and the missing pieces were not small. They represented the very part that may have displayed the ancient Greek vision of the cosmos. Researchers began reconstructing what could no longer be directly seen. This is where archaeology became something almost like detective work. A broken tooth here, a shaft position there, a fragment of an inscription, the spacing of a surviving hole, the thickness of a bronze plate, a gear with a particular number of teeth. Each clue constrained the possibilities. The machine could not simply be reconstructed however someone wanted. Any serious reconstruction had to obey the physical evidence. And that produced an extraordinary realization. The mechanism was not merely tracking the moon. It appears to have been designed to represent a much larger astronomical system. In 2021, a team led by researchers at University College London proposed a detailed model of the front display, incorporating the Sun, Moon, and the 5 planets known to ancient Greek astronomers: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Their model used surviving physical evidence and the inscriptions to reconstruct a possible 3-dimensional cosmic display. But there is an important word there: possible. Scientists have not recovered a complete working machine. They have recovered fragments. That means every reconstruction contains different levels of certainty. Some parts are strongly supported, others are plausible, some remain controversial. This distinction matters. Because the Antikythera mechanism is often described as an impossible ancient computer, but the real story is more fascinating. It was possible. Someone built it. We just don't know exactly how. And that raises the question of who could have possessed the knowledge required to make it. The machine dates broadly to the Hellenistic period, around the 2nd century BCE, although the precise dating and circumstances of construction remain subjects of study. Its intellectual world was one in which Greek mathematics and astronomy had reached remarkable sophistication. This was the world of philosophers, mathematicians, astronomers, engineers, and craftsmen. It was also a world connected across enormous distances. Greek communities interacted with Egypt, the Levant, Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and the wider Mediterranean. Ideas traveled, astronomical observations traveled. Mathematical methods traveled. The mechanism itself appears to embody this exchange. Some of its astronomical cycles have connections to Babylonian traditions. Its mechanical design reflects Greek mathematical thinking. Its inscriptions are written in ancient Greek. The machine, therefore, represents something larger than a single invention. It may represent the convergence of several intellectual traditions into one physical object. But who built it? That is where the evidence becomes thin. One possibility is that it came from a major scientific center in the Greek world. Another is that it belonged to a workshop connected with a particular astronomical tradition. Some researchers have explored possible links to Rhodes, famous in antiquity for astronomy and scientific scholarship. Others have considered connections to mainland Greece or other Hellenistic centers, and throughout the history of research, famous names have been proposed. Archimedes is perhaps the most tempting. He was known in antiquity for constructing extraordinary mechanical devices and astronomical models. Ancient writers, including Cicero, described mechanical representations of the heavens associated with Archimedes and other Greek thinkers. But there is a crucial problem. There is no inscription on the Antikythera mechanism saying, "Made by Archimedes." There is no surviving workshop record. No ancient manual tells us who built this particular machine. So the connection remains a hypothesis, not a fact, and that uncertainty is one of the most compelling aspects of the story. We can understand what the machine did without knowing the name of the person who made it. Think about that. The engineer's name has vanished. The workshop has vanished. The original drawings have vanished. The manufacturing process has vanished. But the machine survived, and even that survival was almost an accident. The ship carrying it eventually sank. Its cargo scattered across the seabed. Marine organisms covered the bronze. Sediment buried the remains. Centuries passed. Empires rose and disappeared. Languages changed. Religions changed. Scientific traditions changed. And somewhere beneath the Mediterranean, this little mechanical cosmos waited. Then, around 1900, divers found it. And even after it reached the surface, the mystery did not immediately reveal itself. The mechanism was too damaged. The corrosion had fused components together. The original appearance had been destroyed. For decades, researchers had to work from fragments and photographs. One of the great breakthroughs came when modern imaging technology effectively allowed scientists to look through the corrosion. Suddenly, letters that had been invisible became readable. Gear relationships could be examined. Hidden structures emerged. The machine was no longer a lump of bronze. It was becoming a diagram, and the diagram revealed something extraordinary about ancient engineering. The gears were not crude ornaments. They were functional, mathematical components. Some of the gear trains used carefully chosen tooth counts to represent long astronomical cycles. Others appear to have reproduced the moon's changing speed across the sky. That last detail is especially remarkable. The moon does not move across the sky at a perfectly constant angular rate. Ancient Greek astronomers knew that its apparent motion varied. The mechanism incorporated a mechanical solution associated with that irregularity. In other words, the machine was not simply saying that the moon moves. It was attempting to reproduce how the moon actually appears to move. This is where the artifact becomes almost unsettling. because the machine does not merely contain astronomical information, it transforms astronomical theory into mechanical behavior. A mathematical relationship becomes a gear ratio. A celestial cycle becomes a rotating dial. An eclipse prediction becomes a position on a scale. The heavens become machinery. And yet, the more scientists discover, the more questions appear. For example, exactly how were all the missing planetary mechanisms arranged? How did the original front display look? Which features were actually present, and which belong only to modern reconstructions? How accurately did the machine reproduce the intended astronomical models? And perhaps most importantly, was the Antikythera mechanism unique? Or was it simply the one example that survived? What do you think? Was this an advanced civilization lost to time, or is there another explanation? Let us know in the comments. The phrase lost civilization is tempting, but the evidence does not require one. There is no need to imagine an unknown super-civilization. The ancient Mediterranean already contained sophisticated mathematical and astronomical traditions. The more reasonable mystery is different. Why did this level of mechanical engineering become so rare? Why don't dozens of similar machines survive? Why did later history not preserve a continuous line of development from this device to modern mechanical computers? One explanation is simple. Ancient technology was vulnerable. Bronze machines could be melted down. Wooden cases could decay. Workshops could disappear. Technical knowledge could remain inside small communities, and a machine designed for specialized astronomical calculations would never have been produced in the same numbers as pottery or weapons. One lost workshop could mean an entire branch of technology disappearing from the archaeological record. There is another possibility. Perhaps machines like this were not as common as we imagine. Maybe the Antikythera mechanism was an exceptional creation made by a rare combination of astronomers, mathematicians, and craftsmen. If so, its survival becomes even more remarkable because we are not looking at the ordinary technology of antiquity. We may be looking at the surviving masterpiece of a technological tradition that largely vanished. Recent research has continued to challenge researchers. Studies have examined the mysterious circular holes associated with one of the mechanism's calendar dials. Statistical analysis has supported the idea that the original ring may have contained approximately 354 or 355 holes, consistent with a lunar calendar, rather than simply an Egyptian-style 365-day calendar. Other recent reconstruction studies continue to debate missing gears, missing indicators, and the precise function of individual components. That is important because it reveals something people often misunderstand about archaeology. Discovery does not always mean certainty. Sometimes discovery creates better questions. The Antikythera mechanism is a perfect example. We know much more today than researchers knew in 1902, but every new answer can reveal another layer of uncertainty. And then there is the wreck itself. The original discovery was only the beginning. Modern underwater archaeological work has shown that the wreck site is larger and more complex than early recovery operations suggested. Research has documented additional cargo and structural remains, while later expeditions have continued investigating the seabed. Which means something extraordinary remains possible. More fragments could still exist. Not necessarily another complete machine, perhaps only a gear, a piece of a dial. A fragment of an inscription. One small object could answer a question that has resisted researchers for generations. Imagine discovering a missing gear. Researchers could measure its diameter, count its teeth, determine where it fits. Then suddenly an entire section of the machine might become understandable. Or imagine finding a bronze plate containing the name of its maker. That single inscription could transform our understanding of where the machine came from. For now, we do not have that answer. And perhaps that is why the Antikythera mechanism remains so compelling. It is not mysterious because nobody understands it. It is mysterious because we understand enough to realize how extraordinary it really was. We know that ancient craftsmen could create miniature gears. We know that Greek astronomers understood complex celestial cycles. We know that Babylonian astronomical knowledge influenced the wider intellectual world. We know that mathematical astronomy existed at a very high level. And we know that someone combined these ideas into a compact mechanical instrument. What we do not know is the complete story. Who designed it? Who manufactured it? Where? Why was it commissioned? Who used it? How many similar machines existed? What did the missing components look like? And why did this technological tradition disappear? Perhaps the most haunting question is the simplest. What else did the ancient world know that we have lost? History is usually written from what survives, but survival is not the same thing as importance. A civilization can produce thousands of inventions and leave behind only a handful. The Antikythera mechanism reminds us that the archaeological record is not a complete library of human achievement. It is a collection of survivors, and sometimes one survivor is enough to completely change the story. For centuries, the ancient world was often imagined as technologically simple compared with the modern age. The Antikythera mechanism complicates that picture, not because ancient Greeks had modern technology. They did not. They did not have computers, electronics, or industrial manufacturing, but they possessed something equally important to technological history: the ability to translate abstract mathematical ideas into a physical machine. That is a profound intellectual achievement. And it forces us to reconsider what advanced really means. Perhaps technological progress is not a straight line. Perhaps knowledge can appear, flourish, disappear, and later be rediscovered. A brilliant invention does not guarantee a permanent technological revolution. Sometimes history forgets. Sometimes civilizations lose techniques. Sometimes wars, economic changes, political collapse, or simply the disappearance of specialist communities break the chain of knowledge. And sometimes the only surviving evidence is a corroded machine at the bottom of the sea. The Antikythera mechanism began as an object nobody understood. Today, it has become one of the clearest demonstrations that ancient engineering was capable of extraordinary sophistication, yet it remains unfinished in our minds. Its surviving fragments tell us what it could calculate. Its inscriptions tell us something about how its makers understood the heavens. Its gears reveal mathematical relationships transformed into motion, but the missing pieces still hold their silence. Maybe one day archaeology will recover another fragment. Maybe a new imaging technique will reveal something hidden inside the bronze. Maybe a newly discovered ancient text will identify the tradition that produced it. Or maybe some questions will never be answered. And perhaps that is fitting, because the Antikythera mechanism was built to make the heavens predictable. Yet, after 2,000 years, it has become something almost opposite, a machine that creates questions. It reminds us that the past is not dead, it is incomplete. And sometimes the smallest surviving object can open the largest mystery. The machine was built to calculate cycles that humans could observe in the sky. But its greatest legacy may be something it could never calculate: our own capacity to forget. Someone once turned a handle on this machine. Someone watched the gears moved. Someone understood what those numbers meant. Someone looked at the heavens and decided that the universe could be represented in bronze. We do not know that person's name. We do not know their face. We do not know where they worked. But 2,000 years later, their machine is still asking us to look upward. And to wonder how much of human ingenuity has disappeared before history ever had the chance to record it. If ancient mysteries fascinate you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Chronicle Nexus, and share it with fellow explorers. Because somewhere beneath the surface of history, there may still be another machine waiting to be found.
And perhaps the next discovery will not simply tell us what the ancient world knew. It may tell us what we forgot.